Our story takes place in Glimmerwood Forest, a magical place tucked away in a deep, secret valley. Glimmerwood wasn't just lit by the sun and moon. It had its own lights, the wonderland of sparkling, twinkling light. In the heart of this forest was a sparkling stream, and in that stream was the most incredible beaver dam you have ever seen. This was the home and workshop of Bucky, a young beaver who was a brilliant inventor. But Bucky had a secret. For a beaver who lived in a forest of light, he was terrified of the dark. His latest and greatest project was the super-duper illuminator. His goal was to create a steady, reliable light, a light that would keep the scary darkness away forever. His only true friend was a firefly named Flicker. She was a tiny spark of energy, zipping and zagging through the air, full of witty remarks and boundless bravery. "What's this pile of pebbles supposed to do, Bucky?" she'd chirp. "Are you building a very complicated paperweight?" "It's not a paperweight, Flicker," Bucky would reply patiently. One evening, something strange happened in Glimmerwood Forest. A quietness, deeper than normal, settled over the trees. It was a silent hush, as if the forest was holding its breath. Then, one by one, the lights began to fade. A patch of glowing moss flickered and went dark. The mushroom clusters dimmed from a bright lantern glow to a faint glimmer, and then to nothing. Worst of all, the fireflies began to struggle. Flicker and her family found their lights growing weak and sputtering. The grand, nightly dance of a million sparks became a sad flutter of a few hundred tiny embers. Fear, cold and prickly, crept through the community. The rabbits huddled in their burrows. The badgers sealed the entrances to their sets. No one knew what was happening. Bucky was more terrified than anyone. The encroaching darkness felt like a monster creeping towards his dam. A few nights later, a tiny, weak light blinked at his doorway. "Bucky, let me in," she buzzed, her voice weak. Bucky immediately opened the door and helped his friend inside. "Flicker, what's wrong?" "It's the hush, Bucky," she panted, resting on a blueprint stone. "It's draining all our light. We have to do something. Hiding in here won't help. The darkness seems to be coming from the oldest, highest place in the forest," Flicker explained. "The great oak tree on Whisperwind Peak. That's where the hush is strongest." Bucky's heart hammered against his ribs. It was everything he was afraid of. "No, I can't. I just need to finish the illuminator, and then we'll be safe in here." But then he looked at his friend. Flicker's light gave another weak sputter, dimming so much he could barely see her. The thought of her light going out completely was even scarier than the darkness outside. His love for his friend was finally bigger than his fear. With a deep breath, he nodded. "Okay, we'll go." He carefully loaded the super-duper illuminator onto a cart, and the anxious beaver and the brave little firefly pushed open the door and stepped out into the dark, silent forest. The journey was terrifying for Bucky. Every hoot of a distant bird, every rustle of leaves, sounded like a monster. He stumbled on roots he couldn't see and got tangled in vines. But Flicker, despite her weakness, was his constant cheerleader. "Just a little further, Bucky. You're the bravest beaver I know," she'd whisper whenever he wanted to give up. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the base of the great oak tree. It was colossal, older than the forest itself. The silence here was absolute. As they looked up, they saw it. Perched on a massive branch high above was the source of the darkness. It was a colossal owl. "It's a monster," Bucky whispered, hiding behind his cart. But Flicker, even with her fading light, was furious. "Hey, give us back our light, you big feather duster," she squeaked at him. Startled from his silent contemplation, Professor Hoot swiveled his head. He let out a deep, mournful hoot, so powerful it created a gust of wind that sent poor Flicker tumbling through the air. He expected to see a monster, but instead, he saw two huge, sad eyes. He heard the owl's lonely hoot, and it wasn't a roar of anger, but a sigh of sadness. In that instant, Bucky understood. Bucky's fear vanished, replaced by a wave of empathy. He called out, his voice shaking but clear. "Excuse me, sir, why are you taking all the light?" Professor Hoot looked down at the little beaver. I don't mean to," he hooted softly, his voice like the rustle of old pages. "I am very old. My eyes, they have grown terribly sensitive. The bright lights of your forest, the dancing and the shimmering, they cause me pain. So, I must draw the light into my feathers to find some peace." A flash of inspiration struck Bucky. A solution born not of fighting a monster, but of helping a friend. He scrambled to the super-duper illuminator. Its main feature wasn't just the crystal. It was a special dial he had made from a snail shell. A dimmer. He turned the dial not to its brightest setting, but all the way down to its lowest. A soft, warm, gentle glow bloomed from the crystal, bathing the base of the tree in light no brighter than a harvest moon. Professor Hoot blinked. The light didn't hurt. For the first time in a century, he could look at a light without wincing in pain. As he relaxed his great wings, the stolen light was released. A soft shimmer returned to the moss at the base of the tree. The oppressive hush was broken. "It's beautiful," Professor Hoot hooted gratefully. "I'm sorry I called you a feather duster," Flicker said quietly. And just like that, an unlikely friendship was formed. Their journey home was completely different. Professor Hoot glided ahead of them, his incredible night vision pointing out the safest paths. The forest was no longer pitch black, but filled with a soft, gentle twilight. Bucky was a hero, not because he was fearless, but because he had used his brilliant mind and his even more brilliant heart to understand someone who was different. He was no longer afraid of the dark, for he knew that even in the deepest shadows, you could find a friend.